Okay, so for week one, we're going to look at sort of Ireland up to about 1690 and then onward a little bit to the early 1700s. And then we'll be able to sort of tackle where the sort of how Ireland was connected to this larger British enterprise, in particular, maybe even English enterprise early on. So, Ireland around 1690 or so was a place that dealt pretty particularly with. So these blue areas are English. Sorry, this is Ireland 1600. This is so the blue areas are Ireland controlled by the English, right? So you can see, sort of through the 1500s, and we'll talk about what happens in the 1500s that helps establish a English control, at least in certain areas. And then, you have sort of particularly down here in the southeast. And then you have largely a large portion of Ireland that is controlled by native Irish, right? Landlords and so on. Around Dublin was called the Pale, right? So this is the area that was, again, why Dublin will become the sort of capital of Ireland. So the Reformation in England begins in the 1530s, and for many of you, you might know of the story of Henry VIII and his attempt to get an annulment from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and how that ultimately leads to his splitting with the Catholic Church and creating the Episcopal or Anglican Church in 1534. Now, as a result of that, there is, a lot of the nobility in England become Anglican to sort of help validate and get the support of Henry VIII. And as that occurs, right, you have, within, let's say, English then turned British politics, one of the pieces of that is that there's going to be more and more opposition between sort of Catholic elites and Anglican or Episcopalian leadership. So, that'll come back, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the 1600s officially. In 1542, Henry VIII begins more conquests of Ireland, and in 1542, there is the suppression of a rebellion that helps get Henry more control over the island of Ireland with something called the Crown of Ireland Act. This is an act where Henry forces all landlords in Ireland to claim allegiance to him. And this is a way for him to solidify his own authority and a way for him to solidify the control within this island. So in 1590, the sort of leadership of Ireland establishes the College of Trinity College here in Dublin. And this is a way to train Anglican families, and in particular to train Anglican ministers. The Church of Ireland was established, which was an Anglican church that was supported publicly by the people of Ireland. So the people of Ireland paid a tithe, a 10% tax that they were required to pay to the Church of Ireland to help support them, no matter what religion they were, right? Whether they were Catholic, so Catholics predominated mostly in the sort of south and west. There were a lot of Presbyterians, right? Another Protestant denomination up there in the northeast. So ultimately would be by the 1600s. So all of this, right, helps to establish more and more English domination and more suppression of sort of the Catholic identity of Ireland. Again, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Now, that being said, although there was a huge number of Anglican leaders and Anglican control here in Ireland in the late 1500s and the early 1600s. The prohibition against Catholicism did not really matter outside of Dublin, because around 1600, remember, Ireland was predominantly run by Catholic interest. So if you left sort of these Catholic controlled areas, Ormond, South Leinster, Kildare, the Dublin and around the Pale, there really wasn't any true impact that this would have on you. But if you were in those areas, Catholicism was illegal. And outside of those specific areas, Catholicism was still very powerful, and there was still a Catholic landed interest and all that, right? And again, we'll talk more about the sort of why religion is so important here over the next couple of days. Between 1610 and 1650, though, there becomes more and more domination by English, or at least English-connected people. So Ulster becomes more. So there's at one point in this, what this map is on the bottom right here is trying to show you, there are 4 historic kingdoms, or 4 historic areas within Ireland. Ulster, so you might hear Ulster Scots or Ulster Kingdom. So this Ulster's up here in the northeast. So there were 6. Today there are 6 counties that are in Northern Ireland, connected to the United Kingdom. Most of them are from Ulster. Then you have Leinster over here, Connacht over here, and Munster. So Leinster, Munster, Connacht, and Ulster. These are the 4 predominant historic Irish kingdoms that exist. Anyway, Ulster becomes largely inhabited by English and Scottish transplants. So they have a strong connection to Britain and to the interest there. They are moved over, and their interest becomes the dominant political force. Down here in Munster, sort of, areas like Cork and Kerry and Waterford, they are strong planter classes, right? This is a very strong agricultural area. This will become the most densely populated of the kingdoms in Ireland, even Dublin excluded. So there's a huge amount of planters and farmers and agrarians that move into there. By 1613, the Irish Parliament represented all 32 counties. Now, the representation there was 132 Protestants to 100 Catholics. Again, showing you the predominant development of Ireland as a Protestant nation, or at least as a Protestant ruling class, right? Something like 80 to 90% of the population was still Catholic, not Protestant. Through the 1800s, right, there is this growing tension between Catholics and Protestants. So one of the things I think, again, those of you who know your British history, you'll know that James the 6th of Scotland, the 1st of England, moves from Scotland to England. He is raised a Presbyterian. He is raised a strict Calvinist, in fact, but his son his son Charles I sort of helps to reestablish at least a desire for Catholicism to be returned to Britain. That creates a civil war, and then by the time you get to the 1660s, you have the return of Charles II. And importantly, at the end of the 1600s, you have the introduction of James II as king. And this is a huge hope. There's a huge hope here for the Catholic Irish. So the Catholic Irish interest, right, really hope that, again, there's still this landed, wealthy, powerful group of Catholics out here outside of the Pale, outside of the English-dominated areas. So there is this hope of Ireland return, sort of becoming Irish again, or at least, the British government becoming Irish again. But this inspires the Glorious Revolution. So let's talk a little bit about the Glorious Revolution. So if we stretch, so the House of Stuart takes over. So I mentioned Henry VIII. His daughter, Elizabeth I, died in 1603. And as a part of the settlement after her death, right, she gives the throne to her cousin, James I and VI. So James I and VI becomes king of England and Scotland, and through his kingship of England, becomes the king of Ireland. And this creates the House of Stuart. So fast forward through the 1600s, we get to James II and James VII. James was kind of a closeted Catholic, and his first wife, Anne Hyde, died, and he marries Mary of Modena, an Italian princess. When he marries her, the fear is that his Catholicism would become more prominent. And in fact, so he had two daughters from his first marriage, Mary and Anne. Mary had married a guy named William. And when he got remarried, the hope was that he wouldn't have a child, or if he did, if it was a woman, a girl, that family the daughters would win, and the daughters were raised Protestant. James's second wife gave birth to a son, James Francis Stuart, and this creates a huge amount of fear. So a plot is hatched to kick James II out of England and replace him with William and Mary. So the Glorious Revolution is this moment where James II and VII is kicked off the throne and sent into exile. So this gives William and Mary control over England, Scotland, and Ireland, and again, this allows for the process of Catholic fears, concerns over Catholic domination. So that's where we'll cut it here. Sort of looking at the part at which James is kicked out, and we'll talk about the sort of implications of this for Ireland and the implications of this for moving forward when we see each other again.